Once hailed as the prodigy, BJ Penn was a symbol of raw talent, fearlessness, and Hawaiian pride. But now, at 45 years old, his life is spiraling in ways no one could have predicted. He's made a video pleading for help, insisting his family has been replaced by imposters, and he's been cast out of the very home he grew up in. With restraining orders, bizarre claims, and public confusion, fans are left asking, what happened to BJ Penn? In this video, we'll uncover the tragic decline of a once great champion, exploring the heartbreaking state of his health, finances, family, and mind. What you'll hear might truly shock you. Before tragedy ever crept into BJ Penn's world, he was one of the brightest lights in combat sports history. Born J.D. Penn III on December 13, 1978, in Kailua, Hawaii, he grew up in a tight-knit, wealthy family. His parents owned real estate in Hilo and had deep political and business roots across Hawaii. BJ didn't come from struggle, not in the traditional sense, but he still carved out his legacy with fire. As a teenager, he trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Ralph Gracie and later with Nova União in Brazil. By the age of 21, he became the first American to win a gold medal at the World Jiu-Jitsu Championship in the black belt division, a feat that instantly made him a legend. They didn't call him the prodigy for nothing. Soon after, he jumped into MMA and the UFC spotlight. Within just 3 fights, Penn was already being talked about as a future champion. In 2004, he shocked the world by defeating Matt Hughes to win the UFC welterweight title, moving up in weight and dominating one of the most feared men in the division. But BJ wasn't finished. He'd later capture the UFC lightweight title as well, becoming one of the first multi-division champions in UFC history. As his career unfolded under the bright lights, was that, behind the legend, the seeds of a downfall were already beginning to sprout. Despite his fame and fortune, BJ never left Hilo. He stayed close to his roots, living with family in the same neighborhood he grew up in. The discipline that earned him world titles began to fade. Losses mounted. Between 2010 and 2019, Penn lost 7 straight UFC fights, a heartbreaking streak that left fans wondering what happened to the man who once seemed invincible. But the real fall, the truly tragic unraveling, wasn't inside the cage. It was outside, in his personal life, where things began to spiral into something darker, something far more painful than defeat. As BJ Penn's career stalled, so did his grip on stability. By 2014, the once feared fighter had become a shadow of himself in the Octagon. His final run in the UFC was marred by confusing performances, bizarre training decisions, and emotional post-fight interviews. Fans begged for him to retire. Dana White eventually stepped in and insisted Penn would never fight in the UFC again. But BJ couldn't walk away, not from the fight and not from the chaos that had taken over his life. What followed was a series of disturbing headlines. In 2019, Penn was caught on video getting knocked out during a street fight in front of a bar in Hawaii. A second video later surfaced, showing him fighting again in the same night, trying to salvage his pride. These weren't playful scuffles. They were signs of a man unraveling, lost, and fueled by pride, confusion, and possibly something more troubling beneath the surface. Then came the legal issues. His ex-partner and mother of his children filed for a restraining order, claiming Penn had been physically abusive and emotionally unstable. She alleged that BJ had used cocaine, drank heavily, and had been violent toward her. Though Penn denied the accusations, the court took them seriously enough to grant a temporary restraining order. Public sympathy quickly turned into concern. This wasn't just a fighter dealing with a losing streak, this was someone deeply unwell. Despite his fame, Penn seemed to be alone. His former allies, trainers, and UFC contacts rarely spoke up. Many believed BJ was simply stubborn, clinging to a past that no longer existed. But beneath that silence was a heartbreaking truth. Penn's behavior had alienated the people who once stood in his corner. He wasn't just losing fights. He was losing relationships, credibility, and most painfully, the love of his community. By the time the pandemic hit, BJ Penn was nowhere to be seen. Rumors swirled that he was broke, isolated, and mentally spiraling. In one interview, UFC Hall of Famer Bas Rutten said, BJ needs help, not in a tough love way, but real help. Something's not right there. What made it more tragic was that BJ had the means, the name, and the legacy to get that help, but something kept pulling him away from it. And in 2023 and 2024, we began to understand what that something was. In early 2024, a video surfaced that shook the MMA world. It wasn't BJ Penn announcing a comeback or challenging an old rival. It was him, alone, filming himself from inside his home, saying words that left fans stunned. "This is not my mom," he said, while pointing the camera at the woman cooking for him in the kitchen. "My whole family was killed 6 months ago and replaced by imposters." He said this with full conviction, his eyes tired, voice trembling but serious. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a stunt. It was a man in crisis, unraveling before our eyes. Penn then pointed to old family photos, comparing them with current images, claiming to have proof that his new family had different earlobes than the ones in his childhood memories. He insisted that his brother, his father, his mother, all had been killed and replaced by imposters to gain control of his inheritance and the family estate. According to him, no one believed him. Not the police, not the public, not even Dana White, whom he begged to fly to high-low to help him. The most heartbreaking part? He wasn't asking for fame. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was asking for help. In the videos, BJ pleaded with former sponsors to remember the times he'd gone above and beyond, staying extra hours at signings, helping promote events, and asked them to send money if they remembered any goodwill. He even said, "If you ever thought I should have been paid more, maybe you can help me now." This wasn't just financial desperation. It was spiritual, emotional collapse. He was evicted from the family compound and now reportedly lives in a small guest house 200 feet away, bound by a restraining order because his own mother, or the woman he now calls the imposter, was afraid of what he might do. The tragedy isn't just that BJ believes his family is gone. It's that he believes the people closest to him conspired to erase his identity. That level of psychological torment is beyond what any fighter should face alone. BJ Penn was once known as the prodigy, but today, the tragedy of his life is that he may no longer know who he truly is, or if anyone around him is real. The saddest twist in BJ Penn's story is that the very people who raised and supported him, his real family, now fear him. Not because they want to, but because they have to. In BJ's mind, they're no longer his family. He believes they were killed and replaced by imposters who are now stealing his inheritance, controlling his estate, and gaslighting him into madness. This belief has led to emotional outbursts, confrontations, and, most alarmingly, police involvement. His own mother reportedly had to seek legal protection. A judge granted a temporary restraining order against BJ after several incidents escalated beyond the family's control. At the heart of BJ's claims is the delusion that his mother isn't really his mother, that she was swapped with a lookalike imposter. He's used photos of her from his childhood, comparing ear shapes and facial features, claiming they no longer match. "The earlobe doesn't lie," he said in one video, zooming in on her face while she quietly cooked in the background. It's as if he was living in a psychological thriller, except it's real life and it's not a movie. BJ claims that the local police are in on it, that they, too, are part of the conspiracy to protect the imposters. When officers arrived to de-escalate a confrontation, BJ says they took him to jail instead of investigating his claims. This only fed his paranoia. In his mind, everyone is lying to him. Everyone is compromised. Now, because of the restraining order, BJ is forced to live in a small guest unit just outside the family home. He's literally across the yard from the people he believes are imposters, watching them from a distance, believing they've murdered his loved ones. Imagine the psychological pain, believing that your own blood has been replaced, that you're surrounded by enemies, and that no one believes you. It's a profound isolation, a mental prison deeper than any solitary confinement. And yet, in a tragic twist of compassion, the Penn family hasn't cut him off completely. They gave him the guest house. They feed him. They check in. It's love filtered through fear. Because when someone you love thinks you're a killer imposter, the situation becomes volatile, dangerous even. No longer is this just a story about a fighter past his prime. It's now the heartbreaking reality of a son turned stranger in his own home. BJ Penn is not hiding. He's documenting his breakdown in real time. In multiple social media videos, he has reached out directly to the two people who helped build the UFC into what it is today, Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta. But he's not asking for a job or a spot in the Hall of Fame ceremony. He's begging for help, real help. Dana Lorenzo, please come to high-low. I need help, he says, looking directly into the camera with tired, sunken eyes. He's not smiling. He's not promoting anything. He's asking them to come physically to Hawaii and see what he's going through. What makes these pleas even more heartbreaking is how personal they are. BJ isn't leveraging his fame. He's using memory. Remember when I went the extra mile? He says to former sponsors. Remember when I stayed extra hours at signings or helped promote your product when I didn't have to? If I ever went above and beyond, maybe now's the time to pay me back. It's not just a financial ask. It's a cry for acknowledgement, for someone to say, we remember. You mattered. You still matter. BJ reportedly made millions during his UFC career, but success doesn't always guarantee security. Mental illness doesn't discriminate by bank balance. Even if BJ still has money, his pleas suggest he feels abandoned, isolated, and overlooked. In a culture where athletes are glorified for toughness, it's hard for someone like BJ to admit weakness. But in these videos, he's doing just that, baring his soul, exposing his fears, and praying that someone will hear him. What's especially tragic is that no one seems to be responding. Dana White hasn't made a public statement. Lorenzo Fertitta remains silent. Former sponsors like RVCA, Everlast, and Muscle Farm haven't said a word. It's as if BJ is screaming into the void, a legend of the sport, now left on red. We've seen fighters struggle before, but rarely have we seen one of BJ Penn's stature document his unraveling so publicly, so raw. He's not hiding his tears. He's not filtering his pain. He's filming it all, asking for help not from fans, but from the people he thought would never leave his side. BJ Penn fought wars inside the cage, but now, at 45 years old, he's fighting a war no amount of training could prepare him for. And this time, it's not about punches or submissions. It's about surviving his own mind. The signs of mental illness are unmistakable. Paranoid delusions, conspiracy theories, emotional breakdowns, isolation, financial confusion, hallucination. These aren't the behaviors of a man scheming for attention. They're the symptoms of someone who may be suffering from something very real and very dangerous. Many fans have speculated whether BJ Penn could be battling chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, the neurodegenerative disease that has claimed the mental health of so many combat athletes. Symptoms include paranoia, memory loss, erratic behavior, aggression, depression, and even hallucinations. And BJ, after 32 professional MMA bouts, countless sparring rounds, and a fighting style built on taking punishment, fits the profile. BJ was never a fighter who dodged damage. He walked through shots. He brawled. He trained bare knuckle on the beaches of Hawaii, using old-school techniques that punished the brain and body. Over the years, he endured beatings from larger fighters and still kept fighting. Fans respected his toughness, but now we're seeing the cost. The war left scars, not on his skin, but deep in his brain. His delusions about imposters and swapped identities are textbook symptoms of advanced neurological trauma. And the tragedy is, he's aware enough to know something is wrong, but not enough to separate reality from fiction. He trusts no one, not the police, not his own mother, not even himself sometimes. What's worse is the system's failure. Unlike the NFL or NBA, the UFC offers no long-term medical support for retired fighters. BJ Penn gave his body to the sport. He made millions for the company. But now, in his time of greatest need, he's alone. His cries for help echoing unanswered. Fans are left watching helplessly as the prodigy spirals further. Some leave supportive comments, others mock him, but no one, not the UFC, not the MMA community, not the media, has offered a serious public intervention. And that silence may be the most tragic blow of all. BJ Penn's home was once a place of strength, a sanctuary in Hilo, Hawaii, surrounded by family, privacy, and legacy. It was the headquarters of the Penn Empire, a family so respected in Hawaii that their name carries political weight. But now, BJ walks the edge of that compound like a man exiled from his own kingdom. He's legally barred from entering his childhood home. A restraining order filed by his own mother prevents him from being within 200 feet of her house. That house, where he grew up training in the garage, laughing with his brothers, sleeping under the same roof as the woman now called an imposter, is off limits. BJ now lives in a small unit nearby, technically a guest house, but in his words, it's like a holding cell. It's close enough to see the life he lost, but too far to touch it, and he films everything. In one video, he walks the property line, pointing to buildings. "That's where my dad used to live. That's my old room, but I'm not allowed to go near it." His voice shakes. The sadness is obvious, but behind his pain is something more dangerous. A brewing rage. Because in BJ's mind, this isn't a legal dispute or a family misunderstanding. This is a criminal conspiracy, and the people who used to love him are now suspects in the murder of his family. There's a strange duality in BJ's tone, one moment calm and thoughtful, the next moment whispering about surveillance, imposters, and hidden cameras. The backyard he once trained in now feels like enemy territory. "That's not my mom," he says in one clip, zooming in on a woman cooking inside. "That's the woman who took her place." And yet, she looks lovingly at him, offers him food, speaks gently. She is, by every visible measure, still his mother. But BJ doesn't see her anymore. He sees a threat. What makes it all so tragic is how real the betrayal feels to him. It's not a stunt, not a fight promo. BJ is no longer selling a persona. He's trapped inside one. And that small house on the edge of the compound isn't shelter. It's a stage where a mind battles itself every single day. BJ Penn wasn't just a fighter. He was a movement. At just 23, he became the first American to win the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Championships at the black belt level. He went on to win UFC gold in 2 divisions, knocking out legends and choking out giants. He was Hawaii's hero. Dana White once said, "BJ Penn is pound for pound one of the most gifted fighters to ever step in the Octagon." That wasn't hype, that was fact. But it's precisely because of his greatness that this fall hurts so much. We're watching one of the most talented fighters in MMA history unravel publicly with no safety net. The man who once walked into a cage with GSP and Diego Sanchez now walks alone into his own psychological battles, and the fight's only getting harder. After his peak years, BJ went on a losing streak. He took fights past his prime, against younger, faster, hungrier opponents. But fans didn't mind the losses. They loved him for trying, for showing up. But behind the scenes, things were getting darker. Legal issues began piling up. In 2019, he was involved in multiple street fights outside bars in Hilo. Videos surfaced of him brawling, being knocked down, then getting back up, like it was still 2004. But it wasn't. BJ wasn't training. He wasn't fighting under contract. He was spiraling. Those incidents were written off as just BJ being BJ. But no one saw the pattern until now. The erratic behavior wasn't new. It was building. And with no support system to intervene, it kept getting worse. People close to him began noticing he wasn't the same. He started losing relationships. The same charm that won over crowds now carried an edge of paranoia and volatility. Interviews turned strange, public appearances grew rare, and then the videos started. The ones where BJ walks through his family home filming people he doesn't recognize. The ones where he says, "They killed my mom and replaced her." This wasn't the voice of a fighter anymore. It was the voice of someone in distress. The prodigy was gone. What's left is a man searching for answers no one can give him. In one of his most haunting videos, BJ Penn looks into the camera and simply says, "Help me." There's no bravado, no call-out, no fight hype, just a plea. A plea from a man who once stood on top of the world, now standing outside his family home like a ghost. It's not often we hear a fighter like BJ, who prided himself on heart, toughness, and legacy, use those words. But he did, and the world barely noticed. In that moment, BJ wasn't asking for another title shot. He was asking for someone, anyone, to see him, to believe him, to acknowledge his pain. He reached out to Dana White, to Lorenzo Fertitta, to old sponsors, asking them to remember who he was. Not because he wants fame again, but because he wants to feel real again, to feel like the version of himself who once had clarity, purpose, and a future. It's unclear what he truly needs. Money? Possibly. Support? Definitely. But more than anything, BJ needs validation, not of his delusion, but of his worth, of his life after fighting, of his value beyond his fists. The tragedy is that combat sports, for all its glory, often leaves its warriors behind. The UFC has no retirement plan, no psychological care fund, no protocol for helping legends who collapse after the spotlight fades. And BJ's story isn't just about him. It's about every fighter who took headshots for a paycheck and now suffers in silence. BJ Penn is still alive, but his identity is fractured. His sense of self is dissolving in front of a camera lens, and his final cry for help may be the last chance for anyone to step in before this story turns from tragic to irreversible. If this video reaches the right people, maybe it'll be more than just a documentary. Maybe it'll be a call to action. Because if BJ Penn, the prodigy, the warrior, the champion, can fall this hard, it means any of them can. And if we don't help now, it won't just be BJ we lose. It'll be every fighter who thinks no one is watching.